want to do tonight is have a little bit of a chat about design-led thinking. This, as many of you know, is sort of a foundational tenet to our approach at Anthemis, and a real opportunity in financial services, in particular traditional financial services, often, I think it's fair to say, lack or don't give the importance to design that perhaps it merits. So just to start off, maybe if Matt and James, if you guys could introduce yourself to give everyone a little bit of context, and then we'll start asking you some hard questions.
Hard question. Okay. James Moed. I work at IDEO. IDEO is a global design and innovation consultancy. I lead up a lot of our work in financial services here in Europe, which means that I spend a lot of time with a lot of people talking to them about what money means to them, and then a lot of time with a lot of designers trying to figure out ways to make those experiences really work better for people.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt Heinl. I'm Chief Creative Officer of Moving Brands. Quite a similar job to you in a sense, but less specifically focused on financial services. So I tend to float across a lot of different huge businesses, global businesses, and lots of startups as well across our 3 studios, London, San Francisco, and Zurich.
Super. So maybe to frame the conversation a little bit, maybe an anecdote of my experience in terms of design in financial institutions. I worked for many years in an investment bank, and perhaps investment banking is an extreme example of this within the financial services spectrum, and I'm not sure if it's the same in other industries, but my experience of talking about design in investment banking was that it was very much consigned to, that's nice, it's sort of icing on the cake, it's maybe the marketing people talk about it, but when it's serious, let's talk about something serious. Let's talk about finance, let's talk about pricing products. You know, if there was any discussion about design, it was about design of new financial products or financial engineering, and there was a real culture that, design was fluffy. It wasn't material, and that was, that was challenging, and maybe one of the many reasons that that I was driven to found Anthemis. In your experience, James, working with financial institutions, have you had similar experiences or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you think about investment banks, I think we've been approached by a couple of folks in the research departments who wonder why their reports never get read and stack up, in bankers' inboxes. And I think one said, the last big thing to change in research was the invention of the PDF, right? So you see this sort of clash all the time within financial services. Yeah, I mean, in many cases, we come against folks who feel that design is just the way it looks, or if they're interaction savvy, the way you click from this to this to this. And I think that, from our point of view, I guess basically say most financial services, lots of companies, not just financial services, think of design in terms of outcomes, right? Design is how it looks, maybe to a certain extent how it feels, and I guess, I don't know about Matt, but we think of design in terms of process, right? So design is not just what it looks like in the end, it's the way you understood people's needs and lives before you even got to decide what it should look like. And it's the designer's way of thinking, which isn't just making an enormous presentation, then handing it off to someone. It's the idea of prototyping, right? Of taking an initial idea, building it out really cheap, see if it works, going back to the drawing board, building it out really cheap, a little bit better, seeing if it works. And so I think when we think of design, we think about a design thinking, design process, and certainly that will all lead to something not just beautiful, but usable and hopefully delightful.
I think we're on a similar page here. It's one other thing I'd add to that is that I think it's also a lot about purpose. Some of the things that have been discussed before we came up here are really designing the way in which you're going to do something. What posture are you going to take in order to make something that you can't predict is an opportunity in the future for people behaving in a way that you can't predict as well.
So I'm going to just do a quick straw poll. And I'm going to be divisive to start with. So no startup founders answer to begin with. For everybody else, how can I ask this so it's simple yes or no? Would you characterize the thinking or the understanding of design in your organizations to be about how it looks, relatively superficial, or more? That would be the first group, and then the second group will be, or a more profound, embedded thought process around all of your business model or processes. So first group, superficial, make it pretty. How does your organization think about design? Okay, really? And second group. Okay, so that means your organizations don't think about design, which is interesting in and of itself. And actually, to be fair, would echo my experience, although it's a few years old. Okay, now startup founders, how would you characterize how design thinking is it crucial to the way that you think about your business, or is it an add-on? Crucial to your business.
Cool.
Okay, add-on. Don't think about it at all. Good, because I was going to ask you to leave the building.
Can I ask you a question? For those who refer to it's crucial, when did you know that? Like before you started the business, or at some point where something really wasn't working? Before.
That's really consistent with our experience working with startups and the opposite experience with the very large companies. I'd also, I don't know if this is factually correct, but it'd be interesting to work out, based on your question, what the relative spend is in those organizations, because I think you'll see a huge spend in the organizations that don't necessarily think about design versus the ones that do and consider it at the beginning because they start to understand what benefit it has to the things that they're making for people.
But how can design be? Can you give a concrete example or an anecdote how design can be a real competitive advantage? You know, something that can go into a PowerPoint deck to the board and get them excited.
Oh, can I?
So
May I?
go for it. Yeah.
If that's not an oxymoron.
Maybe don't put it in a PowerPoint deck. I was going to say.
You've killed it already.
I think too many boards are presented things that Bill Gates designed for someone else. And actually, you're trying to make something for people, and those people in the boardroom are people as well. And design can touch many different things, as we know. It's best to try to explain it in the way it was intended, rather than through another medium that's probably going to dilute it at best.
I guess I would say I said there's sort of 2 points in your question. One is how can design really earn its keep at a board table or in a PowerPoint presentation. And I think this from our point of view, in almost any way that a business is going to succeed from a customer, it depends on customers' behavior, right? You need people to act in a certain way, right? And ultimately, if you want people to act in a certain way, you have to put some real thought into the behavior you want to change, right? So certainly if you want a service that is, really, we did something with PNC Bank years ago, this virtual wallet thing that we see copied in a lot of places. They wanted to get young people, interested, and that means that they had to, design it so that banking looked like the way young people think about money. If you want to fire more cashiers and get more people using self-service, then that self-service has to be designed in a way that people feel at ease and comfortable sitting there doing their transactions in a public way. So I think the way it works itself into those presentations is when you connect it to a specific customer behavior that really affects the bottom line, because that's how you change behavior, through design.
So you guys have worked with a lot of different organizations, probably some very design-led, probably some very not design-led. How would you characterize the DNA of a design-led or design-thinking organization? Is there a set of 16 rules to implement?
I haven't prepared of the Shakespearean play.
The really interesting thing that Matthias, I think the point about the 15 of them being existing before technology, for me, is extremely powerful, because a lot of this stuff is common sense. It's the kind of thing your mum would tell you. And I think people make this more complicated than it needs to be. Of course, executing it is a different story. But a lot of these things are kind of good behavior. Be nice to customers, don't try to cheat them, understand what they're after. After all, they are the customer, and so forth. I do think what you tend to find is, in relation to your question, Sean, I do think that sometimes there's a clearer understanding the higher up you go in the organizations that use design. But there's also an empowerment of the people who are working with people day to day, and that's being listened to. And those ideas, those experiences are being shared through the organisation, and then actions are happening off the back of those things.
So that resonates me. You know, we have the fortune, and this whole evening is about bringing, you know, big together with small, old together with new. You know, to be fair, it's much easier to have that sort of ethos in a smaller organization or in a newer organization than a large organization that's existed for many, many years. If you're the CEO of a large financial institution and you're convinced by this 10-minute diatribe that being a design-led organization will help your bottom line, you know, what should she do? What should that CEO do to try to drive that kind of culture or behavior into the organization?
I mean, I can name a couple things. I mean, firstly, get the risk people involved in the design experience from the beginning, right? Don't get risk people who understand the opportunity cost of putting something out there, or of not putting something out there that really makes people happy just because it tweaks risk in a certain way. So, I think we've seen the most successful situations where risk folks and design folks and customer insight folks are actually working together to try to really figure out how to get something that is, both, works from the risk side and also, makes customers happy. There's that. I mean, there's an element of having a culture of, I hate using the word experimentation or prototyping, right? I think there's one, bank, I worked with, in the States where they had built, the branch of the future in a bunker somewhere, and they had spent like so much money on hundreds of thousands, of dollars, and then we decided, we're not going to use that, and so we basically took about 500 pounds, a couple weeks of work, a whole bunch of cardboard, and built a version of the branch of the future in a warehouse somewhere, and took a bunch of customers through it, took a bunch of staff people through it, and learned so much about what people need from a space, what people need from a design, and just having a culture that embraces quick, cheap iterations of things rather than investing tons of money in some future thing that will ultimately be launched or imposed on an unwilling public.
So that's like Eric Ries's new book, The Lean Incumbent.
Absolutely.
There we go. To wrap up, because everybody's hungry, I know. What if you could pick out one or two aspects of financial services that you believe will be or is already being disrupted by design-driven thinking? What would they be? If you can give maybe one or two examples.
I mean, one of the things that I'm particularly focused on right now is realizing the fact that people don't make financial decisions at the bank, right? They make it at the hospital, at the university, in the shop, at the when they're trying to evaluate their house. People don't make financial decisions at the bank, and so I think anyone who deals with education finance, healthcare finance and billing, any of those sort of unique situations will soon be disrupted, or I hope will be disrupted by companies that are going to get great financial tools and financial decision making into those environments instead of just waiting for people to just deal with stuff at the bank.
My one's probably a little bit more helicoptered. I think very topical point at the moment is about values and culture. Setting that baseline, defining what that organisation wants to be about and who it's for, should drive a lot of these decisions in order that they're actually authentic when they turn into experiences for people. I think you need to do, in my experience, it's extremely successful when you do both these things at the same time. Sequencing, it needs to be in parallel for that to be really successful.
Great. Is there anyone that has a question for these two guys, who's brave enough to stand between dinner and having these two bright guys up here? No, everyone's hungry. All right. So with that, bon appetit, and hopefully this will catalyze a few discussions around the table. Thanks.